I've just got one thing to say about this video. Home office goals. Hey Spider fans, and welcome back to the Tarantula Cave for this episode 10, the final episode in the series for this year of If You Could Only Keep 10. If you haven't been watching, then this is all about me asking big names in the world of arachnology. If you could only keep 10 tarantulas, what would they be and why? We've had some brilliant guests on this show, and I just feel incredibly humble to have had such wonderful people take part. This episode is super special. I've saved, I hope, the best for last. I hope you're going to agree with me. Andrew Smith has made the time. He's a very busy man, and he's made the time to put together his list of 10 species, and it is a joy to behold. So I'm not going to mess around. Hand you over to Andrew right now.
Welcome. My name is Andrew Smith, and for the last 35 odd years I've travelled the world collecting tarantula spiders. Now during that time I've written numerous scientific papers, published a number of tarantula books, and as well have described over 50 new species of tarantulas that are new to science. Some that you'll be familiar with are Pelinobius, Hanovilasumica, Pelinobius tigrina wesley, and of course Brachypelma baumgartneri. Now I also make tarantula documentaries. 30 odd years ago I made one of the very first ever made, which was Desert Tarantulas. And if you want to see what I'm doing today, well, visit Love Tarantulas YouTube. Now, before Christmas last year, we were out in India making a brand new documentary about Pelinobius metallica. That's right, the breathtaking blue pokey. It's a spider that is very dear to my heart. Why? Because 20 odd years ago, I rediscovered it after 120 odd years. But it's not my favourite tarantula. Now I know that Pelinobius metallica is a wonderful blue job, but in truth, my favourite tarantula of all time is the humble Brachypelma hamori. You can pronounce that hamori or hamori, entirely up to you. And the reason I like these spiders so much is because they're amicable disposition. Now I use them in my lectures, and when I'm working with students, if I need to have a tarantula on my hand, then you can't do better than this. It's not easy to tell the difference between hamori or smithy. The only true guaranteed way is DNA. But what you can do is look at the front legs. Now, that's the femur, that's the patella, that's the tibia, and that is the metatarsus, that's a tarsus. Now, on the apical half of the tibia, what we can see is there is a soft cream. It can even be creamy white. That's hamori. Now, if we were looking at creamy rusty red, then I'd expect that to be smithy. Now, it is not foolproof by any stretch of the imagination. Up on the Borsus River, which is the most northern part of the smithy distribution, the range so to speak, we found that smithies up there were very similar to hamori on the other side of the river. So it's far from foolproof. Now, Martin Brammer has asked me if I would like to kick around my favourite top 10 species. So, number 1 would have to be Brachypelma hamori, a position it shares with Brachypelma smithi. Because you guys are such amicable little troopers, aren't you? Eh? Possibly the most perfect of all tarantulas if you're looking to have them simply as a pet. Spider number 2 Well, for me, that's going to be Brachypelma auratum. Now, there has to be a reason why you're going to choose a particular spider as a favourite. Now, for most of you, it's going to be because it's a particularly handsome beast in your collections. But for me, as an arachnohistorian, as an academic, it has to have an integral role to play in whatever project I happen to be working on. So if I'm filming a documentary, it's going to be the centre of that story. In other words, the research is going to revolve around that particular spider. I'm going to go to that country, find the spider, and then tell its story. And for me, Brachypelma auratum is all about the late Dr. Gunther Schmidt, a dear old friend of mine. And Dr. Gunther Schmidt beat me to Brachypelma auratum. I was going to describe the spider as Brachypelma flamus. It happens to be one of my favourite spiders. And dear old Gunther beat me to that paper by a month. And in the world of science, who publishes the paper first gets the spider. And unfortunately, I was a month behind Gunther. So it's not going to be called flamus, it's going to be called auratum. Brachypelma auratum. You can see why I wanted to call it flamus. Look at that wonderful flame marking on the knee. That's my favourite for number 2. And number 3 would have to be Poecilotheria rufilata. Why? Well, I know it is a scrumptious, big, mossy green beast. One of the largest of the pokies and a truly wonderful tarantula spider. But the reason it's a favourite is because I recall the sheer difficulty of trying to collect that spider. Now, I was in India about 20 years ago with my dear old friend Paul Carpenter, and we were scouring the hills above Trivandrum, and I jest you not, after 2 weeks we had not got a sniff of the spider. Day after day after day of scrambling through rocky hillsides, and I can remember even offering a reward in the villages and to the tree fellers and log cutters, anybody who could find me this spider. And eventually, I think we were on the very last few days, that was the last week before we had to return back to the UK, and a moped drew up, a couple of kids got off, and they told me that my offer of a reward had got out of, this was a village 30 miles away, and they knew of the spider. It was in a hole in a tree just outside their village. And I can remember jumping in our jeep, and we followed a little moped, and in the end we found the spider. Ironically, it turned up shortly after that in a nearby pumping house, but that is the way of fortune when you're searching for tarantula spiders. The other thing I remember about that expedition is I grew the most magnificent beard. Other than searching for the spider, I also wanted to collect Indian folklore, spider tarantula folklore. And I knew that would mean I would be interviewing Adivasi tribal leaders. And in order to impress them with the fact that I was a learned academic, the only way of doing it would be to grow a suitable large bushy beard. And I thus met and interviewed gentlemen who had beards as good as mine. So, fond memories of that particular spider. And you'll notice that when I have chosen a spider, it's because there is a story that I can associate with it over the last 30 odd years when I've scoured hillsides all over the world in search of spiders. So, what will be number 4? Number 4 would have to be Aphonopelma chalcodes. Why? Well, it brings back fond memories of my dear old friend, the late Michael Sullivan. Now, Sully was my fellow field worker, and I couldn't have written Tranche of the USA and Mexico without him. It took 3 years to write, in the sense of collecting data, research, etc. And one summer was spent in the American Museum of Natural History, drawing type material. But generally, every summer holiday, and I was a young teacher in those days. The moment I broke up, I think within 12 hours, I was on board an aeroplane flying out to Tucson or Los Angeles or Oklahoma. And outside the airfield would be Sully in a great big old American pickup, and we'd hit the road. And we spent a month scouring the deserts or grasslands or wherever it happened to be in search of tarantula spiders. And I think later on, when I managed to get commissioned to make desert tarantulas, they're probably one of the very first tarantula documentaries ever made, Sally again was with me working in the field. I have immense fond memories of that time. So, number 4, Pelinobius jacodes, and the reason? Because I had the pleasure of working with my dear old friend, the late Michael Sullivan. I think for number 5 it's going to have to be a Pelinobius somani. Why? Well, other than the fact it is a very, very nice spider with its very distinctive white striating marks on the legs, there's 2 main reasons why. First of all, it was the very first time that I worked with my dear old friend Michael Jacoby, the renowned American arachnoculturalist. But other than that, it has a wonderful historical story behind it, and I'm an arachnohistorian. It was field collected by Berthold Seaman, who happened to be the ship's naturalist on HMS Herald, a Royal Naval Survey ship. And I tell the story of Seaman and HMS Herald in my new Brachypelma box set. Or you can go onto YouTube and just Google Brachypelma Red Leg Tarantulas of Mexico. And in that documentary, I do tell the story of HMS Herald, Berthold Seaman, and in that particular case, Brachypelma emilia. But I must admit to you, I have very fond memories of that field trip to Costa Rica. I think number 6 is going to have to be Avicularia. Why? Well, other than the fact it's obviously a gorgeous, fluffy little arboreal with its wonderful pink toes, it is also a spider that is richly enveloped in arachno history. First of all, it's one of the first tarantula spiders to be described in science in 1758 by the great Carl Linnaeus. But also, it's the spider that turns up in the iconic image of the bird-eating tarantula spider, drawn and painted by Madame Sibylla Merian. And that lady does turn up in my documentary Lazadora 1640. But in truth, I've yet to make a specific documentary about that lady and that spider. But I have every intention of doing so. So, number 6, Avicularia. I think number 7 is going to have to be Stromatopelma calceatum. One, again, it is an incredibly beautiful tarantula spider, arboreal, African, and takes no prisoners. But also, again, it's enveloped in arachno history. It was described by Fabricius in 1793, which again makes it one of the very oldest spiders to have reached Europe. And it's linked to the slave trade, what's called the trade triangle. Goods, etc., trading goods would come out of Europe and they'll be taken down to the Gold Coast, essentially, which is Ghana. All along the Gold Coast will be a series of forts, and slaves will be gathered by the Arab and African traders in the hinterland and brought to these forts. Trade goods will be swapped, usually muskets, and then the slaves will be shipped to the Caribbean and to the Americas. In turn, sugar, molasses, rum, tobacco will be then shipped back to Europe. It's called the trade triangle. And for me, I wanted to make a documentary about that very subject. So I prepared a field trip to Ghana. The documentary, by the way, has never been made, but will eventually get made. But the field trip was to do a reconnaissance, and I was with, as usual, my favourite team, Paul Carpenter, Guy Tansley, etc. And we scoured Ghana for 3 spiders. The key one, of course, was going to be Schmatopelma calceatum, but also Heteroscodra maculata, and as well a Histocrates up in the grasslands. We never found a Histocrates, but we did find the 2 arboreals. So images popping up, etc., are of calceatum and of our field trip. But accompanying us was what is now Europe's top man working on African baboon spiders, and that is Richard Gallen. And Richard Gallen is now easily the world's leading authority on African material. But the first book ever published on African tarantula spiders was me, Baboon Spiders, Tarantulas of Africa and the Middle East. And I'm talking quite a few decades ago now. And I can remember a very young Richard Gallen. He possibly hadn't even begun his degree at Manchester University. And he approached me to have his copy with his father, with his copy of his book signed. And I just love this image because it's Richard Gallen standing on my shoulders, so to speak, and photographing a Schmatopelma. And in that image, if you are a researcher, you quickly realise that whatever you do is simply a rung in a ladder at that given space in time, and that the next generation of researchers will step onto that rung and move on. And Richard Gallen stepped onto that rung, and his research was far, far greater, more expansive than anything I did on the subject. And in turn, it is highly likely that when Richard Gallen is my age, there will be another young buck wanting to step up on his shoulders and move African research on one big step further. So, again, Schmatopelma calceatum, and again, the memories that it's raised concerning the Ghana field trip. Number 8 would have to be Brachypelma baumgarteni, or Baumgarteni, call it as you please. Why? Well, it's the only Brachypelma that I have actually described, even though it's actually my favourite genus. I had hoped, obviously, to describe Brachypelma auratum, but that didn't take place. Pip to the post. So, Baumgarteni is my spider. It was collected by Mark Baumgarten, and Mark I owe a great deal to, because when I was working on Tarantula USA in Mexico, I didn't have access to a number of the Brachypelma species that were being described by Gunther Schmidt. So Mark Baumgarten went out to Mexico and collected them for me. I was working flat out on the American material, and I simply didn't have the money to go to Mexico as well. So I owe that gentleman a great deal, which is why I named the spider after him. Brachypelma baumgarteni, or Baumgarteni, call it as you please. The one you named is always going to be the one that is the most important to you. You're my species, aren't you? My Brachypelma. Brachypelma baumgarteni. You're beautiful. Number 9. Postlefaria Hanema villasumica. That spider is particularly dear to me because it's highly likely that Postlefaria Hanema villasumica will become the first Indian pokey to become extinct. It is extremely endangered and very, very vulnerable. It only has a very limited range and distribution. And when I first went out to India with Paul Carpenter 20 odd years ago in search of that spider, we discovered the most amazing tamarind plantation, which was rich with these spiders. I think every tree had 2 or 3 spiders on them. It was just, even now I look back and think, God, it was breathtaking. But when we went back before Christmas, the whole area had been completely cleared, and the spider is now extremely hard to find. We've made a documentary which I'll be probably screening sometime in the middle of next year. But I must admit, it does still makes me choke actually, right, that such a wonderful spider is going to be lost. We did get back to the UK, and it was proposed with Indian conservation groups and London Zoo for its weight behind the project that we should set up a micro sanctuary, but I'm afraid it got mired in politics, as these projects always do, and it never took place. And now the spider may be lost. Number 10. Well, we know it has to be Poecilotheria metallica. I suppose everybody, and I haven't looked at the other people who've chosen their 10, has probably chosen that very spider. But it's dear to my heart, as I said earlier, because I was the first white European to set eyes on the spider in 120 odd years. But I suppose really it's become the torchbearer of the genus Poecilotheria in many ways. And when it was first collected, and it was first collected by a French arachnoculturist called Jean-Michel Vedez, it was brought back and captive bred, and slowly, bit by bit, we've managed to captive breed this spider to the point where the price has crashed, which is always a good indication that there's plenty of them on the market, so to speak. So, is it endangered? Well, 20 years ago when we first found it, I must admit that was a thought that was in our mind. The hillsides north of Guti, where the spider can be found and where the type material probably comes from, unfortunately, right, is systematically cleared for charcoal to be used in the brickworks, local brickworks. But we rediscovered this spider elsewhere, much further along the chain, the eastern of the Eastern Ghats. So the spider is not endangered. In fact, we know it has its footprint in a number of wildlife parks. So, considerably more common than first thought. Poecilotheria metallica, probably one of the most beautiful tarantulas. And amongst the other tribal peoples, it's sometimes referred to as Kali spider. And I intend to, in the documentary, use some wonderful folklore that we collected 20 odd years ago concerning this spider. So, that is my collection of 10. If I thought hard, I'm sure I'm going to come up with another 10 with no problems whatsoever. But you'll note, all of them are linked with what I do in the world of academia, in my world of filmmaking, book writing. For me, the spider has to have a rollicking good tale behind it to make it of interest to me. But you in turn will have your own criteria for what ticks your boxes of what is your favourite 10 tarantula spiders. Farewell, and check out lovetarantulas.com, where you will find my books and you will find the documentaries that I make. Bye.
And there you have it. I think Andrew did a fantastic job there. I just think his way of choosing the species was really, really good, really personal to him, and kind of linking a lot of really good memories and a lot of amazing experiences. And I think, you know, that's a great way to do it. Can I also just say again that I hope one day to have an office that looks anywhere near as cool as that. So many cool items picked up on his travels, books everywhere. Just, yeah, awesome. Massive office goals. I love it. Better than this. What is going on in this ridiculous room of mine? Yeah, I'm just gonna keep my fingers crossed for next year and hope that something better happens. Listen guys, I am so close to hitting 3,500 subscribers. Since I started, I've basically gained 1,000 subscribers every year. It's not monumental growth, but it means a huge amount to me, and it just means that I'm not talking to nobody. Some of you out there like this, and that is really great for me to know. It makes it worth doing, makes it worth finding the time to do these videos, so I really, really appreciate it. This is going to be my last video on the channel for the year. So if you want to subscribe, please do. It would be much appreciated. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for staying tuned. Thank you so much for your support. I hope you found this year interesting at the Tarantula Cave, and let's see what next year brings. You guys take care.